Thank you so much for being on here. I'm excited to get to know more about your background. Um, so real quick, do you mind talking about what your background is and how you got into fitness and coaching?
Uh, yeah, sure. I've been doing this for now 25 years, and
Hmm.
in that kind of the journey's kind of taken me in a bunch of different places, from working with professional teams and athletes to owning my own training facility for 12 years to going out and being an educator and doing teaching all over the world and teaching other trainers, physical therapists, strength coaches, and that sort of thing on training and programming and working for companies like Functional Movement Systems. Um, and so, kind of done a little bit of everything along the way.
Awesome, that's so cool. My journey in fitness started a few years ago, so it's really inspirational to hear that you've done so many things. Um, so, um, so let's get into a few questions. So, um, so say a guy walks into a gym. Um, uh, what is the most important thing he should focus on to start increasing his strength?
The most simple premise I teach everybody on day one is that in order for this to work, you have to understand one, how fitness works. This works just as it's a stressor,
Hmm.
and so basically you challenge yourself and your body goes, I don't know what you just did, but if you're going to keep doing that, the only way I'm going to survive is assume you're going to do that again tomorrow and have to be prepared for it. And so it'll make the appropriate change depending on what the stimulus is. Now, there's a principle in science called SAID principle, SAID, specific adaptation to imposed demand. So if I lift heavy weight, I'll get stronger. If I do a lot of endurance work, I'll build more capacity. So it's specific to whatever it is. And then once you find out, okay, how do I stimulate it to create the response I want, then it's a matter of being really just two things. You need to be challenged, which, as I just said, you need to challenge yourself enough that you'll change, and you need to be successful. So the perfect example I give is if you were to go and try to bench press a given weight for 5 repetitions, if you could do it with 100 pounds and you go in that
Hmm.
day and you only put on 50 pounds on the bar, well, you'll be really successful. You just won't be all that challenged. So that might not be enough to create and stimulate change. If you put on 200 pounds, well, you'll be very challenged, but you just won't be very successful. So you need to find that sweet spot on what we call the edge of your ability, where you're kind of right between those two things, where you're successful and you're challenged.
Okay, so just finding a way to balance the intensity versus the number of reps you can do at the same time.
Yeah, and make sure those reps or whatever your work time matches, as I said earlier, with the set principle, matches whatever the goal is that you want. If I do, so if I do a squat as an example, if I do it for 1 rep, I'll get really, really strong, but won't really get any endurance. If I do
Hmm.
it for 5 to 10 reps, I'll get, some muscle and some strength and a little more endurance, but still not a lot. If I do it for 50 reps, I'll get a lot of endurance, but not really a whole lot of strength. So you have to kind of find, based on exercise science, you have to kind of find what is the goal you're looking for, and then match your reps and sets accordingly.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. So what kind of a split would you recommend somebody that's new? They want to put on 10, 15 pounds of muscle. Would you recommend like a put pull legs or weight? What would you your thoughts on that?
When someone's a beginner, or they're I should let me just a better term is non-advanced. If you're a non-advanced trainee, and what do I qualify as a non-advanced trainee? Is someone who hasn't had at least 6 and probably more like 12 months of consistent training age, which is what we call how much time you spent in the gym consistently. If you don't have at least that, if you don't have a very specific time restriction, like I work with people that have very specific time restrictions. If someone who's getting for an MLB tryout, he has to be ready by July, whatever date it is, and they're not changing that date for him. So that changes things. And then you also need to be able to train at least 4 days a week, because if not, then there's too much to cover to try to do it in split programming. So if you're not one of those advanced markers, if you don't have at least most, if not all of those, you're in non-advanced person, and so then I always start you on a full body split, and just then break it up in terms of your movement patterns of push, pull, squat, lunge, bend, rotate, carry, those sorts of things, and then make sure I have a good blend of those spread out throughout the week. I don't need to get them all on one day, but I'm going to do some sort of full body routine each time in the gym. It depends on what we do. If squatting is our major lower body pattern that day, we can do hinge the next day or the next workout, or lunge or single leg or something to that effect, where we can mix between movement patterns. And I don't necessarily work on parts as much as I do patterns, unless there's a specific lagging part that we need to focus on. There's also some parts that can tolerate more volume than other parts. Lower body generally can't tolerate as much volume as upper body, so I can get a little more frequency with some of my upper body patterns versus my lower body patterns. Generally, the bigger the parts, the more time they need to recover and the less volume that they can handle. Well, when we look at recovery, the analogy I use with clients is explain to them that training is, as I said, it's a stimulant, it's a stress, but the analogy I use is it's just planting seeds. So I'm the farmer planting seeds when you do your workout. But, when you plant seeds, it doesn't automatically spring flowers or harvest. You need to give it time, and with that, you also need soil that'll grow. And if I drop it on a hardwood floor right here, nothing is going to grow. So what creates that fertile soil for it to grow is two main factors, which is number one, sleep, and number 1B, 1A being sleep, 1B being your nutrition. All the other peripheral stuff, whether you want to talk about cryo tanks or any of the other active types of means, those are a distant second to those main two things. So it's nutrition and sleep, and then also how much other stress you have in your life. So if you're someone that's going through your final exams at school, if you're someone that's going through a divorce, as a lot of things going on at work, recovery ability is compromised, and so your volume of training has to adjust to that. And so that kind of gives me more of a window. I have to look at the soil before I can tell you about the seeds. So when you say, is there a 72-hour window? It depends on the individual, it depends on their training age, and it depends on their capacity, which is going to be a blend of those two things. I mean, we look at minimums and say, okay, well, these are kind of minimum thresholds that we look for in a lot of different areas, whether it's you should have a minimum of this exposure to strength, this amount of exposure to your cardiovascular conditioning in each of the 3 primary zones of cardiovascular conditioning. You should have when you get into the nitty gritty of your workout, you need to have the ability to do at least this minimum in this pattern before we let you progress to the next progression of the exercise. Now, there's very few things in my world that are laws. There's theories and there's principles. There are a few things that are laws, but there's one that they call the law of thermodynamics, which is, if you consume more calories than you burn, you're going to add weight. If you take in less calories than you burn, you're going to lose weight. And it's really that simple. Whatever diet it is of the hundreds of thousands of different diet variations are out there, whatever gets you to be the most compliant to meet that for your goal is the one that's going to work for you. So I can give you tons of success stories of people that did it with keto, with intermittent fasting, with high protein, with vegetarian diets. All of them will work as long as you fall under that law that will not change, that you need to have be above or below that demarcation of your metabolic output for that day. So now, that being said, the calories is obviously a huge factor, and then of those calories, you have your macronutrients, protein, carbs, fat, and the most important of the macronutrients I found is protein. Is that they've done research where they told people, look, if you just eat your target number of protein each day, don't worry about anything else. You can have whatever you want. Those people still lost weight, and so when I give somebody their guidelines for nutrient intake, I'm going to say, get somewhere in the ballpark of the calories. You're never going to be exact. They've done research where they have dietitians on a buffet line and said, figure out exactly the amount of calories on this plate, and they can't do it. So the average layperson is not doing it either. So I said, get within a rough ballpark of your calories, and then I need you to hit the protein mark. Now that protein mark is going to change slightly, and it's going to change primarily based on whatever your goal is. And most of the guidelines and the science show based on off of kilograms. But if you do the conversion, it starts pretty much where you're talking about, where it's roughly a gram per pound of body weight. And that number may adjust up or down depending on the age of the individual, where they are in terms of their training, the intensity of their training, other stress factors all come into play where I might slide that number up or down a little bit. But that's a good starting place for most people. And most people really struggle to hit that number too. Well, the irony of what I tell my clients, the cruelty of nature is this: is that the skinny kids who want to, athletes that say they can't gain weight, is when I look at their food logs, they just don't want to eat all that much. And then the irony is, someone like me who's a former fat kid, all I think about is eating. And so we kind of switch brains and body over our bodies, and we be in good shape. But that's kind of nature. Yeah, it's not as simple as goal setting, or if that was the case, every gym that's packed on January 1st would still be packed today, but they're not. 60 to 70% of people drop out within the first 2-3 months of joining a gym. It's not a matter of necessarily just discipline. It's not that simple, because there are people who are very disciplined in certain aspects of their life who are not in other aspects, and especially with fitness. The main thing is that there's two things, and they go hand in hand. One is that when you're making a commitment, you realize you're making a commitment to change yourself, and that means you don't want to be your current self or your former self, which means you're going to create this new version. And to do that, you got to let go of the old version. That's not easy to do. And so whether it's even in your known in yourself of hey, I'm not an exercise person, I'm not a gym person, that label is not myself. of it, and that's the second part that ties in with it, is really the people who are most successful long term. And I've had clients, that have been with me for over 20 years, is that they have non-negotiable habits, meaning that whatever else happens in the world, I am going to be there Monday and Wednesday, no matter what. Monday and Wednesday, I'm going to be there, or every single day. This is part of what my routine is. Every single day, I'm going to get X amount of steps per day, or every single day, I'm going to make sure at least I hit my protein mark, even if I don't do anything else. Whatever you decide is that habit, and then you don't pick all the habits at once. The people who say, it all starts Monday, and they're going to, get up like Rocky and it's 5 in the morning and drink raw eggs and go through it never sticks because they're trying to do too many habits at once. We know in terms of habit forming, it generally is going to take that 3 to 4 week time frame to establish that habit and be consistent with it. And then once you establish that one habit that you've conquered, and now that's part of you and who you are and you're part of your day, then you can stack habits. So even if you said, okay, for the next 21 days, all I'm going to do is, I don't care what I do, I'm going to do some sort of activity each day. And whether it's a walking the dog, whether it's lifting weights, whether it's a Peloton, I don't care what it is, you're going to do something each day. And then once you've established that, then you turn that corner where now you feel like crap if you don't do that. And that's just because that's become the new you. And then on the 22nd day, now I might add that second habit of, I'm going to now add this every day, or I'm going to now add this additional activity every day, or additional habit. And then what they call habit stacking. If you do that basically once a month, and you'll not stick with all of them over a 12-month period, but you'll have a pretty good battery of things that pretty much make up what your day is and who the new you is. %, and that's why community is a big part of it. That's why places that have gyms that have a very strong community, especially a really good, group program, things like that. That's why you've seen the huge rise in CrossFit or some of these other places that have a huge community factor to it. Is I'm not just letting myself down, I'm letting down the other people in the 6 o'clock class that I always go with. And so having that companionship and that community is another huge factor for people who struggle with that discipline or that keeping that promise to themselves. If you have someone else there, that's a huge factor. And that's why, people like myself as coaches help be part of that, because they know if I didn't have that, 9 a.m. appointment with Eric, then I probably wouldn't go. And I've had clients come in and say, if I wasn't going to come up until 15 minutes ago, and then I said, I can't just bail on you. So that's why I'm here. And they ended up walking out feeling great. Great to connect with you. Thank you. Okay, you too.